We are live now on Twitter or slash X and YouTube. And my guest is Jonathan Tannenwald, the soccer writer and also, I'll say part-time media writer of the Philadelphia Inquirer. This is a person that I've known on social media, I think going back many years. We've never crossed paths, and I finally managed to get him on the show. Jonathan, thank you so much. I appreciate taking your time out of the busy schedule to join me tonight here on the Double A team. Thank you so much and welcome.
It's a pleasure, Ken. As you say, we've known each other for a long time, but somehow never managed to actually meet in person. I'm sure it'll happen one of these days.
It will happen. Definitely. It will definitely happen. And this is the first part of that. So getting you on the show, it's something that I've been wanting to do, and I'm glad you're able to
Yeah.
do it. Thanks so much. Jonathan, talk a little bit about how you managed to get to the Philadelphia Inquirer and cover the beautiful game.
Well, I grew up in Washington, D.C. A lot of people think I'm from Philadelphia because I've been here for so long. But, I grew up in Washington, D.C., came up here to go to college at the University of Pennsylvania, fell in love with Big Five basketball, which is the local college basketball scene here, and decided that this was where I wanted to stay. And I've been into soccer since the late 90s. I thought when I chose to stay here that I would end up out of the sport, but it turned out Philadelphia got the Union, got the expansion franchise 2 years later in '08, launched in 2010, and I've been covering them ever since, and covering the national teams also, as I've done now for quite a long time. I'm an
And
old git by soccer standards, is what I'm trying to say.
well, if you haven't been following Jonathan, he's a great follow. Account is the goalkeeper. He also has another account, Jonathan Tannenwald, but the goalkeeper. If you definitely want to follow stuff about soccer, and he does probably one of the preeminent soccer writers in the country. And I'm not saying that just because Jonathan is here with me. I truly do believe that. So
I appreciate it.
yeah, you're very welcome, and we'll talk more about that. But let's first start with the Olympics and the women's soccer team, which had a stellar performance. Of course, Emma Hayes comes in from Chelsea, my favorite team of all, the greatest soccer team, European soccer franchise.
That's your fault.
I'm not biased at all. No, I'm not
Hey,
biased about Chelsea, but no, but seriously, Emma Hayes comes in, uh, a manager there for 12 years. Um, Comes in a short period of time after the period of Lotko, um, coming in and basically changing the team. But of course, she also was a very good fortune of having a healthy Mallory Swanson. What was it like seeing that team and seeing the joy that we saw from that team compared to about last year, about the same time in Australia, when we saw a team like that struggle? So, what was it like watching that team as compared to last year's edition?
look, I'm not as critical of Vlatko Andonovski as other people are and have been. I think he's a great coach. I don't think he's a great national team coach necessarily, because coaching a national team and coaching a club, which he's very good at and has returned to being very good at, is a different beast. We'll never know if he'd had a healthy Mal Swanson and a healthy Cat Macario at the World Cup last year, how things would have gone. International soccer, and I'm sure, Ken, as you know, and a lot of your listeners and viewers have heard lots of people say, it's a game of small margins. And if you get the small margins right through a combination of skill and luck, that's what's going to, that as much as your talent and your work ethic can take you a long way. And everything broke right for the United States this summer. I think Emma Hayes had something to do with it. I certainly think having a healthy Mal Swanson had something to do with it. There's no doubt that Hayes set a different tone in the locker room and maybe let these players be a little looser, a little less worried. Look, if we think over the history of the U.S. women's team, there have been so many big player personalities. Megan Rapinoe, Abby Wambach, Julie Foudy, Michelle Akers. It's not just, by the way, people say, oh, it was just Abby Wambach and Megan Rapinoe. No, there have always been big personalities on this team for its whole history. This is the first time that they've got a manager who's as big of a personality, and that takes some burden off of the players.
Mm-hmm.
And Emma Hayes is willing to put some of that on herself. And I think that helped free some of the psychological side from the players. Now, Emma then ran them into the ground during the Olympics, and it very nearly backfired on her. When we talk about small margins, the U.S. could have easily lost that final, and we're having a different conversation. But Ludmilla was offside the one chance early. Alyssa Nair made a couple of very, very big and very difficult saves, and Mallory Swanson scored the goal. And that's why I say it's worth remembering how easily that game could have gone the other way. And then we're having a different conversation. But it all went right.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a feeling of much joy and much relief for a lot of people that after the last 5 years, where we weren't sure if the U.S. was going to fall from the top of the pile, they are now still very much at the top of the pile, and they're not alone at the top of the pile, and they're never again going to be alone at the top of the pile. But I think we see now that the pieces are there for them to stay in that elite class of teams with Spain and France and England. And then we'll see who else comes in and out of that class over time. Japan, Brazil, if they make any investment. Germany, we'll see who else. But the U.S. is there, and clearly now we can project out to, I would say, about 2031 when the U.S. might host the Women's World Cup again. They're not going anywhere for a while in terms of that elite class.
That's very well put, Jonathan, especially if you remember watching that gold medal game, Brazil was on the attack and they played they had a great plan against Spain. Most every team came into that tournament being very reverential to Spain. Brazil attacked them in their semifinal, surprised Spain, and was able to win that semifinal. Granted, it wasn't the same Spain team that had won the World Cup, but still, Brazil also took that strategy in the very first half of the United States and had them on the run. And you're right, had that goal not been called offside, that's a much different game that the United States has to play on its heels and behind.
And I give Brazil an enormous amount of credit for the way they played Spain, and I quite frankly give Spain a lot of criticism for the way they played.
Yes.
And there were signs before the Olympics that Spain was having problems. They lost a game to the Czech Republic that surprised everybody. They had to come back from 2-0 down against Denmark to win 3-2. And a few of us over here who I don't want to say we're overly critical of Spain, but we're not. We looked at it and said, wait a minute, what's going on here? Maybe Spain is beatable after all. And if you think about these Olympics, Colombia should have gotten them.
Yes.
And didn't, and blew that lead late.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when some of us here started to say, okay, maybe the U.S. can get them if everything goes right. I had before the tournament gamed everything out, because when you do predictions for a soccer tournament, you can say, oh, I think France is going to win on the men's side, or I think Spain is going to win on the women's side. You can say that in the abstract. It's fine. But it's worth gaming everything out, especially in a tournament where third place teams advance, because there are a lot of variables and you have to figure out what the matchups are before you can be so certain in the knockout rounds. I mean, before you can be so certain about who's really going to win. And so when I did that, I realized, wait a minute, if the U.S. and Spain win their groups, then the U.S. has a quite open path to the final.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think they'd win it all necessarily, because I thought that France or Spain would come over from the other side, and I actually picked France to win it all on home soil, and they blew it again like they always do.
Yes.
And that ideally, and I think it did, it shot Hervé Renard out of the U.S. men's job, which we can talk about. I'm hopeful that in the perceptions of the U.S. men's fan base, if they were paying attention, which I don't know if they were, but those who did, hopefully it shot Renard out of their contention too.
Yeah, we'll get to
right. We'll get to that. But yeah, I think it all went right at these Olympics, and it is, for me, who has covered this team for 20 plus years now, I think people who are new to it, I dare say, take it a little bit for granted that the U.S. wins all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I've been around for long enough to remember when they didn't. I was around in 2016.
Yep.
I was around in 2007. In 2011, from 99 to 2015, for 16 years, they didn't win a World Cup. It was surprising enough when they made the final in 2011. Now, they won 3 straight Olympic gold medals in there in 04, 08, and 12.
Right. Absolutely.
So
And
that
that
I have been around this for long enough to remember that it was really only in they were in the mainstream in 99. They had these sort of blips in 04 and 08, but it was only at the 2011 World Cup when Megan Rapinoe hit that cross to Abby Wambach
Mhm.
that she scored on against Brazil in the semifinals, I believe it was. It wasn't the final,
Right.
which a lot of people also don't realize. Only then did the U.S. women's team shoot back into the mainstream conscience where it's been ever since.
Right. Right. And as you mentioned, Emma Hayes comes in, brings in a new attitude, and as you mentioned, is probably is that rare manager that is bigger than a personality than the team itself. So where do you think that, I mean, it's tough to project at this point, but where do you think that she can take this team?
Look, I think again they're going to be among the favorites in 2027, and that's all you can ask for right
Hmm.
now. If she stays past then, and I don't know if she will, if she stays into 2028, then of course they're going to be the favorites in 28 in LA.
Hmm.
But I think she can take this program a properly significant distance. And the question is going to be how many big games can they play over the next 3 years against serious opponents, because the European teams now make enough money that they don't have to come over to the United States anymore.
Right.
So can US Soccer convince them to come over? How often will the US go over there? Um, and then who else will they play? We don't know yet.
Right.
We can't know
But
that yet.
exactly, we can't project, but the future is a little bit brighter looking at it now than than when Emma Hayes started her tenure as coach. We could definitely say that. Talking about the men's team, which again went out in the round of 16 in a major world tournament, aside from CONCACAF. They were in the Olympics. They went to the knockout round. But still, this is a team that's in flux. Of course, the Burkhalter situation. My partner Stephen Nagishi and I have talked about this. How we've criticized Greg Burkhalter and they're blue in the face. But where do we see? Where is that coaching search right now? It's Jonathan.
I haven't been too plugged in on it because I've had a lot of other things to do. I've certainly read the reports that Mauricio Pochettino is in consideration, and I'd be quite happy if he gets the job, but not necessarily for the reasons people think.
Hmm.
A lot of people say, oh, he's a big name from Europe. That's great. We ought to have him. Well, his 2 most famous coaching jobs have been at Tottenham and Chelsea, which are nobody's ideas of clubs you should want to coach. With all due respect, Ken, to you as a Chelsea fan, you know what I'm talking about. Those
Yes,
are 2 absolute basket cases of teams, and you can never really prove yourself all that much if you're the manager there, because you are there for so short an amount of time for the most part in any given case that it's a miracle that he was at Spurs for 5 years. And then
hmm.
he went to PSG, which is another basket case, where he had played previously, which is the only reason why he got any more than a short amount of rope there. I like him because, look, he can coach. We know this. He's got the stature to make the guys on this U.S. men's team pay attention. He knows Matt Crocker a little bit from Southampton, because Pochettino was at Southampton and Crocker was in the youth academy at Southampton, and they crossed paths there for a minute, from what I gather.
Hmm.
And Pochettino can come in and say, I don't know any of you guys. I mean, he knows Pulisic maybe a little bit. Say, I don't know any of you guys. I'm going to look through my own eyes at how good you guys are and figure out who's going to play. And the players are going to have to step up to earn their playing time, and that, frankly, means Weston McKennie and Gio Reyna. I definitely put some blame on Greg Berhalter for the fiasco at the Copa America, but I also put a lot of blame on the players.
Hmm.
They did not play at their maximum level in all of the moments when it was needed, and that's a problem. And it is why a lot of us have said, okay, these players are a little too comfortable right now. It's one
Exactly.
thing to be happy with the national team. That is good. It's one thing to be happy in each other's company. That is good. But you got to go play. And has been said a million times, including, I'm sure, by you and Steve, a national team coach's impact on soccer is actually not all that much, even though we just talked about Emma Hayes and the impact that she's had. There's a psychological aspect. There is a tactical aspect, but it is less of a tactical aspect than in the club game because you don't have a lot of time with the players. So you've got to look at your player pool, pick the best 25, whatever, 26, 23, whatever the number is on a given day for your roster, and then pick the best 11 to play and the best 5 guys to come in off the bench to substitute for them. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And the players have to go deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And we do have a history. Again, this is another item where Ken, you and I have been at this for a while, so we understand this, I think, in ways that maybe some newer fans to soccer in America don't. We put too much on the coach with the U.S. national team program. And again, I realize we talked about Emma Hayes with this. I know that. I know that. But we do put too much on the coach because we assume that the coach can wave a magic wand and all the good things will happen. No, the U.S. women were already talented. They just needed somebody to fix the psychology, work a little bit of a margin, and again, be lucky that Ludmilla was offside and Alyssa Nair made a couple saves. And Emma Hayes did that. The men's coach who comes in has to get the most out of these players, has to get lucky. But I genuinely believe, Ken, that people, for two groups of people. First of all, the soccer community has put too much on the coach historically of the U.S. men's national team and not enough on the players nearly for many, many years. Mm-hmm. There's been a reluctance to criticize the players and say they screwed up. And the one good thing about bringing Greg Berhalter back, which I didn't agree with at the time, but I did say, okay, if he's coming back and the players wanted this, let's put the pressure on the players for once.
Right.
And it didn't really even happen until after they went out of the Copa America, and by then it was too late.
Mm-hmm.
Now you also have people who've come to soccer from other sports. Football, basketball, baseball, etc. Well, what do we have? The football coach stands there with a clipboard and a headset and radios in every play to the quarterback. The basketball coach calls a timeout, which you obviously can't do in soccer, and draws up an inbounds play on a whiteboard. The baseball manager walks out onto the field and takes the pitcher out of the game. The soccer manager doesn't do any of that. He picks the team, he has a couple of ideas, and he stands there and watches like the rest of us. He just happens to be closer to the field.
Right.
And I think that people need to be a little more willing to admit that as we go along.
Exactly. I mean, a very good point by you, Jonathan. And the fact is that, yes, it's more, I mean, the football coach is more of a CEO. The soccer coach is there basically is just to make that right move, is when to make the substitutions at the end of the game and make sure if they go to extra time in an elimination to make sure he has the right people for the PKs for that. Other than that, it's just basically you have this game plan and you just hope that the players can execute it.
Well, that's right. You've got me riled up, which is why I'm shouting about it. But
that's okay.
It's that. But that's I think that is worth emphasizing, and it is not something that even a lot of us in the soccer media take the time, I think, to emphasize properly.
We're speaking with Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer, soccer writer extraordinaire, and I'll continue to say that tonight. Jonathan also covers the Olympics and also a little bit of the media for the Inquirer, along with Rob Tourneau, who does a great job over there as well. Jonathan, you did a little bit of also covering the Olympics and also putting together the Olympic schedule. It was a very busy time for those who cover sports media. What did you think of NBC's coverage of the Olympics?
I thought it was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I really did. And I've been doing sports media stuff and writing about NBC's coverage of the Olympics for a long time now. I go to a lot of their events. I've been to Stanford to do behind the scenes stuff. I am admittedly an Olympics junkie, and they know that. I hate to use the word junkie. I should say I'm an Olympics nut. That's a better word. I'm an Olympics nut. I've been. My first memory of the Olympics was Seoul in 1988 when I wasn't 5 years old yet.
Wow.
I've been watching the Olympics ever since. So it's something that I very much enjoy, and my contribution. I've never covered an Olympics in person. I'd like to someday. I've done multiple women's World Cups, so I sort of know mentally how to do it. I'd like to cover an Olympics someday, as I say, maybe LA 28. Who knows? I would have loved to have been in Paris or London in 2012 or Vancouver in 2010 because those are three of my favorite cities, as you know.
Mhm.
You know that as well as anybody in particular. Um, so, I thought they did a great job with this one. And the reason why is that they gave us everything. And that is what the nuts like you and I had asked for. And your readers and the readers of Awful Announcing have known for many, many years that I used to stand on that hill and say, when are you going to televise the opening ceremony live
Yep.
after all these years, NBC? Because they never did it. And then I think it was at Tokyo when they finally did. They put it on Peacock Live. Even in Rio in 2016, they tape delayed it by an hour.
Mhm.
And you or somebody, might have been you, sent me the BBC feed or something to watch over a VPN back in the day.
Yes. Yep.
Sorry to Dan, if Dan Masonson's listening. Sorry, at least it's been 8 years. The statute of limitations has expired. Let us go. But what you and I also know, because we do pay close attention to this, is that there have been changes at the top of NBC's Olympics hierarchy in the last few years with Molly Solomon and Rick Cordella coming in. And they don't have the same philosophy as some of their predecessors who said we have to funnel everybody into the primetime show no matter what. If we put the stuff online and it's there and people find it, great, but we have to funnel people into the primetime show. Well, now the philosophy is different. Now finally, Molly Solomon and Rick Cordella have the power to say something. I suspect they've believed. I know with Rick, he's believed it for a long time. And you and I have known him for many years, which is it's okay if we put it on NBC in the afternoon and again at night. And if we put it all on Peacock and on NBCSports.com and have a whip around show and let people consume it all, and they will still come back to the primetime show at night because it is what they're used to. And maybe they were out during the day and they want to see the highlights or whatever. And it worked. It worked very well, as the numbers have shown. And here's your shot, Ken. Go ahead and parade your title that you won today.
Well, I'll say this: the Programming Insider, every Olympics or every big event, has sports media writers and personalities predict their overall viewership. I thought, and I thought I was low with this. I said that yes, NBC was gonna have a total audience delivery of what they call it, and I said 18.7 million people. And I said it was definitely going to be higher than the last two Olympics. And I also said it was going to be better. It's not going to be as great as what they had in London, but this is a different audience and different TV landscape. So I said overall 18.7 million people watching all of the Olympics on both platforms, on television and on Peacock. And I ended up being first. So I jokingly said on Twitter today, I want everybody on the platform to stand up, salute, and bow to me, but I don't want that. But I will take the plaudits, and I will take the I will take the I will take the grandeur of that for a day or two, Jonathan.
Well, and look, I was fifth, and for being out of practice, I'll take fifth. I don't mind, because usually in bracket pools and stuff like that, I come in a lot lower than fifth, so I'm not complaining.
Well, in the Olympics, they give you instead of medals, when you're in the top 10, they would actually give you a very nice piece of paper saying that you finished in the top 10. So you would get that if you were in the Olympics.
Yeah, sure. I look, and I also think now there's no going back for NBC now.
Absolutely.
I think they know that. The next Winter Olympics are in Europe, so they'll be able to do the same thing. And then 28's in Los Angeles. and I'm sure they'll put a lot of stuff live in prime time and so on. And then they'll go to Australia. They'll go to, I guess, the French Alps. I think in 2030, is it?
Yes.
So they'll be
Yes.
back in Europe, and then they'll go to Brisbane in 2032, and who knows at that point where we'll all be.
Right.
But I think I would congratulate Molly Solomon and Rick Cordella for this being the Olympics where they were really able to put their stamp on it and say this is how we're going to do it, and it's going to be successful. And one of the reasons why I think Rick knew is because he came out of Peacock and he came out of the Premier League stuff, and he knew that there was an audience for live sport on weekday afternoons and Saturday morning at 10 a.m. and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Absolutely.
for all that everybody likes to call us soccer fans a bunch of communist heathens, we have in fact contributed some things to society, and one of them is proof that people will watch live television at hours that the networks didn't think they would in the past.
Well, absolutely. With as you mentioned, Premier League, UEFA Champions League,
Right.
And the fact is that the proof is in the pudding when the gymnastics team final for the women's team final gets something like NFL numbers at 11 o'clock in the morning. So I think that proves to NBC that there is an audience out there.
And the women's soccer final got 10 million, just a little over 10 million viewers combined between NBC and Telemundo, which was the largest audience for an Olympic soccer broadcast in company history. We're speaking on Wednesday, and I actually just got that confirmed a few hours before we started talking. The women's basketball final, which was on Sunday morning, it started at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time, which is not ideal. It got 7.8 million viewers and peaked at over 10 towards the end. That's a big number.
Exactly. And
as the saying goes, it was a big number in a game where Sabrina Ionescu didn't play enough.
We can talk about what the
among other players who didn't play enough, and I don't mean Caitlin Clark.
No, exactly. And we can talk about that women's the strategy off the air. I'm still a little angry about that, but that should not have been that close.
No.
Absolutely.
And the men's basketball obviously did a monster number. 20 million viewers for the final is just, if not, first of all, it's a monster. But I care more about college basketball generally than the NBA.
Same.
But I'll watch the finals. I'll watch, the big games on Friday nights or whatever. I will watch when it comes back to NBC because I'm a sucker for sports theme music, etc. Sure. I hope that the NBA and the WNBA and FIBA finally get together in a room and say, we need to have an international competition in the middle between the Olympics years that everybody plays in. Really, all the big stars play in. Because the demand is enormous for it. And you can say the same thing about hockey and baseball and so on, and we do, and about whether baseball should be in the Olympics in 28 and the hockey should be in the Olympics and so on. But certainly, there is ample proof now that we ought to have a basketball World Cup of real consequence in that middle year between the Olympics.
And that's a great point. We're speaking with Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer, and Jonathan, this has been during the Olympic break. The MLS went to something called the Leagues Cup, which is a competition between MLS and Liga MX. They were hoping to have Lionel Messi in there. Of course, Messi is hurt. He's not playing in it. They thought they were going to get some excitement between the two leagues, but instead, we don't know what the ratings are because Apple doesn't. Apple is streaming this, and they're not going to release numbers. For just to let everybody know, as a former employee of Apple, I'm very willing to be honest about what's going on over there. They don't release numbers. They're very secretive, and attendance is not what MLS was hoping. What are we going to get out of the Leagues Cup, and is there going to be another one?
My penance for criticizing the Leagues Cup is that the Philadelphia Union are now in the quarterfinals and might make the final. So I have to cover the whole thing.
Yes.
I think it's silly. I would rather MLS play in the US Open Cup. I dislike the fact that they are so insistent that they can only play in competitions on their own terms. I don't like that. It's you do something like that out of fear, not out of confidence. And I don't like it. I can spend an hour and a half going into the weeds. I don't know if it's something that your listeners really care about, but that's the short form of it, is that I just wish that MLS had the self-confidence to take its teams into other competitions that it doesn't control and show how good they can actually be and be okay with it. And that's, to me, what it comes down to about being in the Leagues Cup and not in the Open Cup, because the Leagues Cup is within the walled garden of Apple, to use that old phrase. Sorry. But that's part of what it is. And I sense all the NFL people in the MLS owners' suites who are used to their own sort of walled gardens because the NFL doesn't have to play anybody else. That they just sort of go along with it and they're good with it because they don't necessarily. Some of them see the bigger picture, but a lot of them don't. And it troubles me. And I'll have even more agita if I spend any more time talking about
it. I'll just ask one more question in regards to it. I mean, I know MLS, and I've been. You and I were both part of a Apple media event, which was so secretive we weren't allowed to really write about or talk about it. But what is it that say about MLS about trying to be so secretive and not be open and try and do a competition which really hasn't caught on at this point?
They're getting a lot of money. Apple's
Yep.
paying them a lot of money, and that's what they care about most. And if they can fill their stadiums with Mexican clubs fans, I'm not sure they care about who's in the stands. Ken, my mother says hello. She's watching live and tells me to look into the camera more directly.
I say hello to Mama Tannenwald. We appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Those of your listeners who also listen to the Tony Kornheiser show will recognize my mother, Carol, as a longtime listener of the show as well, an occasional emailer. So she's who I got my love of sports from. So there you go.
We appreciate it, Carol. You are welcome to watch us at any time. And your son and I have to say this: I love your son. So your son's been awesome. Oh, we just lost a little bit of Jonathan over there. We're waiting for him to stream to come back. But in the meantime, we'll talk a little bit more about what's going on with the. Let me see if I can add Jonathan back here. I'll have to remove this. Yeah, so my
internet went out for a minute. Sorry about that.
That's quite all right, but I'm glad you're back. In the meantime, I will stop talking about Leagues Cup, which angers both of us, and let's go back to the MLS at this point. Midway through the season, MLS doing some stuff. What do you think about what Philadelphia Union is doing? And the fact is now we have a messy less sans messy. And of course, they did that for a big part of the season as well last year when he was hurt. Where's MLS standing right now, Jonathan?
All right, here I go again. Look, MLS, and I even know people at MLS who agree with me on this. The league has put so much of its marketing on Messi that it's almost unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of other good players, interesting young players, real stories in this league. And we don't know about them because it's all Messi, 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 Messi. And then when he's out injured for a while, though, they don't really seem to know what to do to get people to pay attention to this, what should be the simplest thing of all, which is it's your local team, go root for it.
Yes.
And they don't do that. That also drives me nuts. And now we're in a situation where there's 2 years to go before the World Cup. But there's really only one full season of MLS left. One full season and 2 half seasons left before the World Cup. That is not a lot of time to construct narratives that bring people into this league. If you really want to capitalize on the World Cup coming here 2 years from now. And I know a lot of people around American soccer circles who, if you ask them, and if you ask me, and I'm sure you'd say the same, is Major League Soccer doing everything it can and should to capitalize on the World Cup coming here in
It is.
2026? The answer is absolutely not.
Mhm.
And it's a real shame because they're going to blow the shot. And I
Exactly.
don't even know what the ramifications is going to be long term.
You know,
I would have right after the 2022 World Cup, I would have launched a marketing campaign that said the next Men's World Cup is here in the United States, and the players who are going to play in it are here right now. And you would have gotten some brushback from the Euro snobs who said, "What do you mean they're here right now? They're all going to be in Europe by then." Or they should be. They shouldn't be in MLS at that point. And I would have said, "Yes, you're right. They will be in Europe 4 years from now, sorry. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about right now." And by the way, they aren't all just American. They're Venezuelan, they're Costa Rican, they're Jamaican, they're Colombian, they're Argentine in the case of Thiago Almada. They're Mexican, they're Canadian, they might be Japanese or Cameroonian or who knows what. That would have been the push. And that chance is lost now. It's almost too late because with 2 years left, there's not going to be a lot of not a lot of time left to to sell enough guys to Europe who are going to be on the World Cup team in 2026. And we can already look at it and say, if you look at how many players had come through MLS youth academies who were on that 2022 World Cup team, whether or not they were in MLS at the time, and the same with Copa America, and what will be the same with the World Cup in 2026, MLS should be confident enough in itself to say, we develop these players. If you want to know who's next, come watch us. Because that is what soccer leagues do. That is what the French league does. It is what the German league does. It is what the Dutch and the Portuguese leagues do, and so on. And I wish MLS really had the self-confidence to do that, but it doesn't.
100%. I mean, there are some great.
I'm going off again.
That's okay. There's some great rivalries in the MLS, especially when you have El Tráfico between LAFC and you have LA Galaxy, and they fill the Rose Bowl. And also the Portland Timbers and the Seattle West Coast rivalries, and even NYFC and the Red Bulls. That yet they don't tap into that. I'm really puzzled by that.
It goes back to all the same stuff that we've said. And it's part of why I enjoyed spending the last 2.5 weeks watching the Olympics, because I just didn't have to worry about it as much for once.
Absolutely. We're speaking.
I want to ask you.
Yes.
What were your favorite events to watch?
Oh, let's see. Track and field, of course, because that's one of my big favorites. Yes. I really found myself enjoying the surfing when it wasn't in a bad weather situation in Tahiti. It was a great vista. I look forward to what LA can do with that. And also, I was surprised that I was actually getting into breaking. I know breaking isn't the traditional sport. I know a lot of people picked on it, but for some reason, I mean, yes, the Australian dancer was in there. She became a meme. But overall, I mean, I enjoyed watching the breaking because of the spirit that brought to it. But also, I liked a lot of the cycling too. The cycling really surprised me because it was just the spirit of it. The road cycling and the track cycling as well. And aside from soccer, what did you like?
The road cycling. I watched the Tour de France as much for the grand vistas of the French countryside as the cycling itself. There were 500,000 people on the streets of Paris for the road races, the men's road race in particular. And I think that image of the hill at Sacré-Cœur filled all the way up to the top with people will be one of the great lasting images.
Yes.
Of these Olympics. I like the track. I cover the Penn Relays meet here, as you know, every spring, where we get to see the high school and college kids before they become famous.
Great event.
We used to have the Olympians. Hopefully someday we will again. The Shikari, the 4x1 and the 4x5. I was not surprised that the U.S. men dropped the baton in the 4x1, because if you watch the Penn Relays, you know they always do. They always screw it up. They didn't drop the baton this time. They ran out of the zone. They always screw it up somehow, and it's infuriating. but the women didn't write. The 4x4s were amazing. Um, the thing that I will remember the most, I think, in the end about the track. I'm sure a lot of people will say Sidney McLaughlin-Levrone for good reason. Mondo Duplantis and the pole vault
Great event.
was extraordinary. The theater of it being the last event of the night, it comes down to he says, I'm going for the world record, even though I've already won the gold. He misses the first two. He's going for the last shot. And the place is going nuts. And as he goes up, it goes dead silent for about 2 seconds. He gets over the bar. He comes down and the place explodes like it was the 1998 World Cup final all over again. It was amazing to watch that live and even again on tape. And I mentioned this track meet that I go to. There are field events at the meet. There's the pole vault. And I used to walk over to the pole vault just to watch it on the infield when I was allowed to do that, which I'm not anymore, unfortunately. If the relays organizers are listening, let the media back on the infield, please, so that we can watch the stuff. I promise you, whatever you've seen of a pole vault on television, Ken, you've probably been to high school meets and whatnot over the years. Whatever you've seen out there of a pole vault on television, it's even more amazing in person.
It truly is. It really is. I have to say that. Very, very true, Jonathan.
And I want to mention one other thing real quickly. I don't know if you watched this. Did you watch the archery at all?
I watched part of it. You know what's interesting is that usually when the Olympics are done, I don't watch anymore. But because Peacock is archiving everything, I'm going back into the events and I will watch the archery.
I would recommend to you the women's team final in particular, because it was such a close margin that the judges on the last, it was either the last or the next to last round with the South Koreans who won it. And they've won what now? 10 straight. They've won every women's team archery gold medal there's ever been. And they came really close to blowing this one. And on one of the final rounds, they shot the arrow onto the line between the 9 and the 10, and it was so close that the judge had to get a magnifying glass and walk up to the thing to figure out who won. That was amazing.
I'm also going to have to mention handball. It's a sport I played when I was a kid in Brazil. I don't
really? Wow.
I don't understand why this sport hasn't taken off in the United States, but to see the crowds in France, it is one of their national sports as well. But the quarterfinal between Germany and France,
that was brutal.
Was one of the greatest events I have ever seen. And Germany winning at the last second, and also France with a chance to tie at the last second, but was saved. It was just to hear the disappointment in the French fans, but just that great atmosphere for that event. And also the women lost as well to the Netherlands in the gold medal match. But still, I really hope the United States fans come out and support handball in LA 28 because it's a great sport.
You'd think we'd be good at it, but nobody really knows.
Yeah, you get some former basketball players. You also get maybe a couple of former baseball players with great arms, and they have the athleticism. And you know how to block out. It's a physical sport. Yeah. It's a game that the United States should at least medal in.
Take a couple of cornerbacks and wide receivers probably too.
Exactly, or safeties, who can hit. It's a very physical sport. I mean, I remember getting hit all the time. The Brazilians were very. They saw me coming in and just said, "Hey, here's a small American. Let's knock him down." I was always on the floor whenever I was 7th grade. But anyway,
it's a good thing. It's a good thing that France won the judo, because if they had lost the judo and the handball, it would have been a tough pill for them to swallow.
Yeah, absolutely.
The judo, I have a lot of friends over there, which is why I watched.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, Teddy Riner was one of the cauldron lighters.
Mm-hmm.
He is a superstar in French sport, absolute superstar. And the fact that he won the 2 golds was nuts, just crazy.
Yeah, and seeing him win those, both the individual and the team, and doing it in dramatic fashion in both events was just absolutely amazing. And the French crowd going crazy for him. And he mentioned this is pretty much his last event there. but to
Mhm.
win it on to win it on home soil, just like Leon Marchand did with in the pool. I think probably the crowd in the Grand Palais was probably louder than in
Cool.
the pool. It was just amazing just to listen
Nuts. It's
to hear that.
crazy. Yes.
Jonathan, before we go, what does the name Grant Wald mean to you?
Oh, boy, what a question. I'm very fortunate that he first started to know me from a relatively young age, and he championed my work for a long time, even when some of my own colleagues would not and didn't care about soccer. And he did. I came to know him for a long time. Obviously, I'd see him at games. I'd see him in New York at Smithfield Hall a couple times over the years. He had a circle of friends that he'd go watch Champions League games with, and I would join them every now and again when I was up there for other whatever else, you know. Um, he was a titan. He was a leader. He did the work. He was a role model for us, not just in how he covered the sport, but in how he fought to get the sport respect at Sports Illustrated, which is a fight that a lot of us who have worked for mainstream outlets over the years have also had to wage. And we knew that because he won it, we could too.
Very well said. I mean, you know, his legacy still lives on, and his shadow over the sports media, especially when you're covering college basketball or covering soccer, still looms very large. And someone who I still look up to. He didn't know me at all. He retweeted one of my things when I said something about him. Very nice, but he doesn't know me from he didn't know me from Adam, but really appreciated some of the things he's always done for the sport. So fantastic. And I know that you knew him, and I just wanted to express how much my appreciation of him for you.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thanks.
Jonathan Tannenwald. One more thing, but we don't want to end a sad note. So one more thing.
Yes. Yes.
Wanted to add, what are your predictions, at least for the second half for MLS?
I think 9 teams are going to make the playoffs from the East, and 9 teams are going to make the playoffs from the West. I'm going to vamp for a second and pull the standings up here in real time. Um, I look. The funny thing is that Inter Miami is actually quite good, whether
Yes.
or not Lionel Messi's on the field, and he takes up so much oxygen that gets overlooked. They're about to sell a guy to Brighton, Diego Gomez, for $18 million. Usually that means you're doing something right, and nobody's talking about that because they only want to talk about Messi and maybe Suarez a little bit, and that's all. I still think the Columbus Crew play the best soccer in MLS, and that's going to continue to show itself over the course of the year. I think the team in my neck of the woods, the Philadelphia Union, will make the playoffs, and I don't know what will happen after that. Out west, I think it's probably a very good thing that the LA Galaxy and LAFC are the top two teams in the Western Conference. And again, we're not talking about that at all because all anybody can bring ourselves to talk about is Lionel Messi.
Right. Right. And quickly, and NWSL, if you have a thought about it.
Oh, I think they're in a terrific position right now. Um, they've got the momentum of the gold medal win. All of the star players are coming back over the next couple of weekends. They've got a Gotham Portland game in on the 24th, I think it is, that's going to have 8 of the Olympic team players involved potentially. You've got a bunch in Washington, which is another huge soccer media market in the country, especially in women's soccer. They're in a very good position, and it's an interesting study in contrast. When MLS went to Apple, I said it's a good thing for them to not have to be in the television ratings rat race anymore against the Premier League and Liga MX. But it's one thing to be out of the rat race and another thing to have absolutely no idea how many people are watching, which is the case right now. And the
Mhm.
NWSL went in a completely different direction and endeavored to get as many games on national television as humanly possible,
Yes.
including a lot of games on free over the air on CBS, on ABC, and this Ion deal where they also have the WNBA and are able to marshal that as a home of women's sports. I've talked to some of the Ion people previously, as you know. They are happy to plant their flag there, and it's been very successful.
100%.
And
And
I think that ideally that would show MLS
yeah,
that for all of the virtues of the Apple deal, it is still necessary to have a second TV package and get some more games on TV, especially on free to air, because you do still need to grow that exposure. And they aren't really doing it.
then they aren't.
It
I mean,
it
they can say Fox, but it's really not, it's a minimum. It's not even a handful of game. I think it's like bottom of the barrel, three, or it's not enough.
well, and it's funny because one of my criticisms of the Apple, all of it, is that it's a good idea, but it's actually not being well executed enough. Because
Mhm.
what we'd hoped for when they got the Apple deal done was that Apple was really going to put its marketing oomph into this. And I don't think they have.
Mm-mm.
Now, I'm an elder millennial, so I don't see everything. But, and I have, so many push alerts set up on my phone that I don't know how many of the ones I get are because of that or because Apple is actually trying to push things out to a wider audience and trying to get every single person in Philadelphia with an iPhone to watch a Union game. But I don't see a lot of what I would call traditional advertising, whether
Mhm.
they are billboards, whether they are television ads, whether they are, as minor as that may seem, I'm not sure it's so minor. I don't walk into an Apple store and see any promotion of Major League Soccer or the baseball for that matter that they have.
Right.
And who knows if they had gotten the NFL or the Pac-12 or whatnot, what they would have done. But if Apple was really going to put all of its marketing might behind this, wouldn't I be able to walk into my local Apple store and see some posters of Union players up on the wall, or Red Bulls in New York City FC players at the Apple store at the World Trade Center, or take your pick? There's a Providence Place still have one,
They still
an
had.
Apple store.
Yep. They
Yes,
still have one.
let's see some Revolution players there or in Boston or whatnot. I've never seen that.
No, and you know what? If you go to an Apple store, what's the first thing you see is a big video wall. There should be, aside from the fact that they put their products on there, if they are a partner in a sports league like they are in MLS, why not put something on there stating that you have a soccer game or you have uh, Saturday night soccer or Friday night
Right,
baseball or you have the
right.
Leagues Cup. Use that to your power. They don't do it, and
They don't do it.
I was when I was at Providence Place, I said we should be if we just signed the MLS deal, we should be splashing that. I said not just on the iPhones, which is what they did, but splash it on that big huge video wall so
That's right.
everybody when they walk by, they're not going to come in the Apple store, but when they see that, they'll say, "Oh yeah, they have MLS." Let's
Right.
let's
Right.
they don't do it. Jonathan Tannenwald, I am so happy to have you on
A
tonight,
pleasure, my friend. It really is.
and
Anytime.
we are going to have you on again. And my
Yes.
friend Stephen Nagishi, when he comes on, he's going to have a lot of questions about U.S. soccer because he's like that's a big bone of contention with him. But
What was his question actually in the end?
it was about the U.S. Was about the soccer thing, and it was also I should mention this. We never got to it. Just quickly before we mention it, the debunked story that happened over the weekend in regards to an
Yes.
MLS Women's League, a Atlanta United site, Scars and Spikes, reported on a MLS-backed women league. It came viral, but then they had to retract the story, and it was pretty much debunked by the national media because now, granted, it was a 16-year-old kid, but that's not the story. Everyone can say, "Oh yeah, it was a 16-year-old kid." He supposedly had sources, but it's fine. You can have a 16-year-old kid write a big story. We've seen stuff like that happen, not very often, but we've seen stuff like this happen before when someone lucks into a story and is well sourced. But what was this all about, Jonathan? What was your reaction when you saw that?
I don't want to. I'm going to disclaim something here, which is that I'm not going to get too far into it because he had actually reached out to me at one point
Okay.
about something, and I don't want to dunk on this kid too
No,
much.
no, absolutely. And we're not
I
doing
I
that.
I think I think there were some cogent points made by other people who were observing this that and the website Scarves and Spikes admitted that what you and I would consider sort of proper editorial procedure was not followed here in checking sources, going around to everybody instead of just taking something that you'd been fed by people. And I was not involved in so much of the reporting process, so I'm not going to try to guess. But you and I are old school journalists in this way. Even though we're either not as old as people think or older than we'd like to be. I don't know where we are at this
I'm as
point,
old as
but
people think, but that's okay.
right. You know, we're old school journalists. We don't report something until we've gone. Somebody makes a claim about somebody else. Well, our MLS is going to do something. Well, I call the league for comments, and I probably call the NWSL for comment too. And I call around a lot of people, and I don't report something out unless the person who is telling me was directly involved in the signing of the player or whatever it may be, right? But something that big, I'm making a lot of phone calls before I put it out there. And I'm getting all the statements from all of the sides into the story, even if they're a "we're not commenting" statement. Anybody out there who's an aspiring journalist should look at this and understand it's okay to take those extra steps before reporting the story. Everybody wants to be first. I'm lucky that I'm in a position where I have a full-time job and health insurance and editors and a structure and all of these things so that I can feel a little more comfortable in saying that. I understand that. But it's okay if you're learning the ropes of this. It's okay to take the extra steps and double back and make sure and check with everybody and have all the official statements in there and so on.
Absolutely, and very well said. And like I said, we're not dunking on the kid. He thought he did his due diligence. He just needed to take a few more steps. But again, not dunking on the kid at all. And you know what? You live and learn.
Right.
You live and
Right.
learn. You own your
And hopefully
mistakes.
his editors do too.
Yep, and you live and learn. And MLS, maybe down the league they do a women's league, but it's just not going to happen right now. Jonathan Tannenwald from the Philadelphia Inquirer, soccer writer extraordinaire, and also part-time media writer. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the Double A team and coming on and taking some time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Ken. And as we discussed before we went on air, I'm sure I'll be back in Providence one of these days and we'll finally get to meet up.
Last year I was in Philadelphia. I was just a very brief trip. I didn't tell anybody, but next time I come down, I will tell you and give you some advance word. And so one day we can share that pint and talk
Yes.
soccer and talk
Yes.
everything
Yes.
down the line. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining the Double A team. Steven and I will be back this weekend to talk about stuff. We haven't been on the air we haven't done streaming in a while. And next week we hope to have a special guest, a special person from NBC who did the Olympics and might be his last one in 4 years. I'm not going to say who it is, but I think you might know who it is. But we'll make an official announcement when that happens. Thank you very much for joining us on the Double A team. Have a great week in sport. I'm Ken Fang for Jonathan Tannenwald. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.